Nobody wants to document old flows by hand. If you ever open a 5-year-old flow somebody else built, you know the feeling. For one complex flow, it's already possible that you can export the JSON, paste the definition into ChatGPT, and ask it to explain what the flow does. But that still means I have to feed the flow in one by one, and that's exactly the manual work I'm trying to avoid. What I want from an agent is the bulk version. Read every flow, write one document per flow, and register each one in a list I can search without me spoon-feeding it. And so I built that 3 ways. Let me show you the output first, and all 3 produce the same thing. So I use the same documentation spec across all 3 solutions. There are 2 pieces, one inventory SharePoint list and one SharePoint page per flow. The inventory list is 1 row per flow with 6 essential fields. It works like a quick lookup library, so I can jump either to the flow itself or to the documentation page. The per flow doc is the drill down, with 7 sections that covers the details. They're on screen, the basics first, then the process, then the flow chart, and an appendix. A list with pages, that's the spec. You will see the same spec produced 3 ways. One more thing, the agent doesn't need a pre-built template page. It builds every documentation with the same structure from one prompt. You'll see the prompt in a minute. Okay, pass 1. Pass 1 is the developer pass, an AI coding agent inside an IDE, such as Cloud Code, GitHub Copilot, that kind of thing. You need FlowStudio MCP to read the flows, and you need a write pass into SharePoint. In my first version, that write pass is a SharePoint service principal, scoped with sites selected to one site. If your tenant cannot grant that, the fallback is to have the agent call helper flows that create pages and update list items. It's more setup, but the agent can create the helper flows and do most of the heavy lifting. And outputs go straight onto SharePoint site pages. This is the fastest of the 3 at runtime. The environment I tested has 46 flows, and this is the prompt I gave the agent. Document every flow in the FlowStudio demo environment. Create a SharePoint list called flow.inventory with these 6 columns. For each flow, create a site page with these 7 sections, add an inventory row. And group similar flows so I can sanity check 3 before you batch the rest. I asked the agent to run 3 flows first, so I could check the output before letting it continue with the remaining 43. The agent picked 3 flows, draft a document page for each, register them in the inventory list. I read those 3 pages, decide whether the session specs producing what I want, and only then I do tailwork to batch the remaining 43. The agent uses FlowStudio MCP to list environments, list flows, and read each flow definition. Then it writes pages and inventory rows to SharePoint through Microsoft Graph. The second half is where the service principal comes in. The agent isn't signed in as me. It's an Azure app registration. It's scoped with 1 permission, sites selected, granted on 1 SharePoint site. It can read and write to that 1 site and only that site. What gets created in SharePoint is exactly what I asked for in the prompt. I asked it to document 3 flows, and it produced 3 site pages and added 3 inventory rows. Each row links to the site page URL and the underlying flow URL. Now look at the pages. Same template is being used no matter how complex the flow. The complex flow has more actions and longer descriptions, and the simple one only has a few actions, but the template structure is the same. If the app registration grant is blocked, you can swap the right side for a Power Automate dispatcher flow. That fallback matters because not every organization will approve a service principal writing to SharePoint. In that case, an agent calls a Power Automate flow, and the flow does the SharePoint write. Though, direct service principal route is the quickest, and the fastest setup is to ask the agent to do the Azure work for you. So you can tell the agent, create a service principal with site selected scope so you can manage the site for me. Use AZ-CLI to create it. Your agent may need you to sign in to AZ once. After that, it can create the app registration, scope it, and save the secret for the project. I walked through that pattern in an earlier post. The link is below. That's pass 1, fastest with service principal, still workable with the dispatcher fallback. On to pass 2. Path 2 is completely under Microsoft 365. You need one Copilot Studio agent with 2 tools added to the agent. The spec is the same. The output can be Word documents or ND files or PDFs in SharePoint document library. It cannot produce site pages. The first tool is WorkIQ SharePoint Preview. You can add it to the agent via Add a Tool, search it, connect, create and authenticate the connection, and add the tool. And this is the Microsoft Preview SharePoint tool for Copilot Studio agents. It can create documents in SharePoint, but not site pages at the moment. The second tool is FlowStudio MCP, the same one I used in past 1. So the same pattern, click Add Tool, select Model Context Protocol, give it a server name, use ncp.flowstudio.app/ncp as the URL with API key, add a header name as x-x API-key, create a connection with your FlowStudio MCP token. It's free to obtain from ncp.flowstudio.app. So now the agent can use WorkIQ to read the SharePoint site, create files in the document library, and write rows to the inventory list. And it can use FlowStudio MCP to read the flow definitions within the Microsoft Copilot Studio surface. The trade-off is the output format, as WorkIQ doesn't support page creation. And this path is relatively simple as long as you have an M365 Copilot license. And the prompt I have here is similar to past 1. Document the flows in FlowStudio demo environment. For each flow, create a Word document with these 7 sessions. Save it into a library called Copilot Doc, and then add a flow to Flow Doc Inventory 2 with these 6 fields. Start with 3 flows for the pilot, and the agent work through it step by step. List live environments, list live flows, get live flow on each, then WorkIQ to write the documentation, then to add the inventory row. So the outcome is we got 3 Word documents and 3 inventory rows. You can see the tool codes on the test pane. This is easy to audit, but here is the wall. In my setup, WorkIQ SharePoint gave me file and list operations, not the site page write path. It writes Word document and list items, not SharePoint site pages. And another trade-off is the mermaid chart. It's not rendered as raw text in Word, and if you want it to render on a site page with a diagram visible inline, we have path 3. And one security note, we create the write-capable agent, and the WorkIQ action follows the signed-in user's access. So consider the security before you share the agent broadly. Now on to part 3. For part 3, we use the same Copilot Studio agent in part 2. It already has WorkIQ SharePoint Preview to handle writing to the inventory list and FlowStudio MCP to read the flow definitions. What we are adding is a Power Automate helper flow. We call it the dispatcher for site page writes. The agent calls the flow, and the flow does the writes. Agent picks an action from the closed list. The flow routes to the write SharePoint REST endpoint. The write happens inside the flow. So it has 8 operations, list, read, create, checkout, modify, publish, discard, recycle. So this flow is added to the agent as a tool, and the agent doesn't get open-ended SharePoint write access. It gets exactly 8 named operations. So if you wanted to publish a page, it calls create, checkout, modify, publish. If you wanted to soft delete, it calls recycle. This is a slightly complex flow, but you don't need to handcraft it. I had the agent build the dispatcher flow itself using FlowStudio MCP. If you want your agent to build this for you, just send the blog post in the link with a screenshot for the flow actions to your agent. Your agent can build this. The flow build may not be perfect in one go, but just as with a human developer, you ask your agent to test run it with all the actions and inspect the flow run history, input and output. Your agent can debug and fix with minimum input from you. You will need to remember to ask the agent to add this flow to a solution so the flow can be discovered in Copilot Studio. And here I want to add more details on the wiring, as it took me some time to get it right. Wiring the dispatcher into Copilot Studio took more manual configuration. The per input tool config is important as we need to add inputs one by one and define the details. The blog post has it explained in detail. The key is that you need to create a closed list for the 8 actions in the flow for the action input property. And for the remaining optional inputs such as page ID, page name, etc., expand the advanced setting and set how many reprompts to don't repeat. An action if no entity found to set variable to empty, no value. And more importantly, you have to toggle should prompt user to on, save it, and toggle off and save again. These steps are ensuring that the agent won't come to ask for information that's optional. You would also want to add one line in the agent instructions. The details is in the blog post. These details matters, especially the per input save cycle. Make sure you go through the details. And now with the same prompts, we see 3 site pages on MCP demo, page ID 11, 12, 13. 3 matching inventory rows, verified end-to-end. All 3 pages created through the dispatcher flow, and the 3 inventory rows are added through WorkIQ. That's path 3. This is the most controlled pattern. It has the easiest govern, but the hardest to set up at the first time. Okay, so which one do you actually pick? Now we see the 3 paths. They share the same spec, but have different trade-offs. Path 1, the IDE agent. You need a developer in the room. This is the fastest setup with a service principal. It still works with the dispatcher flow if Azure is blocked. Path 2, Copilot Studio Agent plus WorkIQ. This is the easiest if your team lives inside M365. The constraint is the output, as it cannot generate site pages. Path 3 is the same Copilot Studio Agent with the dispatcher flow. It is the most controlled version. It produces real site pages, doesn't require app registration, and writes pages through the flow connection. If one of these paths fits your tenant, I wrote up the full build details in 3 blog posts. 1 article per path, links are below. Subscribe if you want more practical ways to use AI agents with Power Automate.